my site. So let's start with contrast ratio. The four most important: contrast ratio. Number two is color saturation, the amount of color in a picture, which is determined by the decoding of the display device. If it's accurate, you get the right amount of color. If it's inaccurate, you might get too much color, you might get too little color. Number three is overall color accuracy, or colorimetry, which is determined by several different factors. Of course, color decoding is one of them. The accuracy of the color gamut, which is dictated to us by the Rec 709 standard for high definition, or the Rec 601 standard for standard definition video. They are slightly different. And grayscale tracking. How accurate is it tracking the grayscale from 0 black to 100% white? All these things combine to give us the overall color accuracy of a given display. And finally, then, resolution. And in our case, motion resolution is what we're going to look at mostly, because that's where resolution starts to have issues. We lose resolution with motion, generally speaking. And all the displays will show you how they lose that, and how we can get some of it back with some of the processing features in the displays, whether you want to use those or not. We'll discuss why you should or should not as we get through that process as well. So, all right, let's dig into contrast ratio. Ed, can we switch over to the generator?
You can hit the lights, or you want?
Just in a minute or two. Yeah, let me talk first, and then we'll get the lights up. We've got a quantum data QD780 generator in the line as well. The first thing that we'll look at, contrast ratio, I think, particularly when you're setting your peak light output at a particular number like we've done here, black is what's going to determine what your contrast ratio is. How good is your black? Because we're all at the same light output. If one of the TVs was at 100-foot Lamberts, the other one's at 35, that'd be a different story. But if we're setting our peak limit light output at a particular value, then black becomes the most, maybe perhaps the most important element of what is going to determine your contrast ratio. There are other elements that will affect it. Gamma is one of them. Recently, you may have heard that in Hollywood they've come and they've actually set in stone a standard for mastering movies to video in terms of gamma. It's now 2.4. It's been laid down. It's now what they're doing. So what we did was we set them all to 2.4, or as close to 2.4 gamma curve as we could get from 0 to black to 100% white. Most of them are tracking very well. There are a couple areas in the gamma curve where some of the displays are not quite perfect. We'll get into some of those numbers in a minute. I think Wayne may have some information for us on a display or two as far as that's concerned. They're not perfect, but they're pretty close. So that's one. I mean, if your gamma is too low and you're coming out of black too quickly, your black level is raised up high, obviously your contrast ratio is going to be affected, right? And when we get to it, I'm going to name the contrast ratio numbers for each of the display devices that we measure. And while I'm at it, I might as well tell you the method that we used was we're using a checkerboard pattern of 4x4, which gives you 8 black boxes and 8 white boxes in black, white, black, white, black, white, black, white. You measure all 8 of each, and then you do division and you do math. We did it on screen with the K10s as opposed to off screen, which will generate a much larger number. Personally, and this is something that I tend to get into discussions and arguments with various different people throughout the industry, but I personally think the more valid method is off-screen, shooting with a point-and-shoot meter from the seating position, because, gee, that's where you are looking at the screen, right? That takes into account how the human being is looking at the picture, number one, and also what the environment is. Because everything in the room will affect it. If this room were white and we were doing that method versus black, we would come up with two very different numbers. Because the light scattering, bouncing off the white walls would knock the contrast ratio number way down. In any case, I just wanted to throw that out there. I mean, to give you an idea, this This panel I measured back in July when I was doing some evaluation work for Tom at the Sharp facility in a completely dark home theater environment, a laboratory type style environment. And I did the off-screen measurement with my Minolta, and I got 555 to 1, which is a really, really good number. To give you a point of reference, in a movie theater, typically you'll get about 180. We do black much better on displays now than film projectors are capable of, but little things like the exit sign up there that's on in the movie theater will knock the contrast ratio way down, almost in half. In any case, the method we used was on-screen with the K10s. I'll rattle off some contrast numbers now.
I just want to add something.
Please.
To another reason why we chose to do the actual on-screen. For flat panels, they're a little different than home with the front projection theater, where the room lighting is going to vary. So if we were going to do it off-screen, we would have had to have set it up specifically for a dark room environment, and only that. But, you know, with flat panel viewing, you watch it throughout the day. So then, if we were to do it off-screen, it would have been more valid for us to do it for both, well, the dark, then a lighted room, and then even a brighter room, so that you can get that idea. Yeah, we can do both.
Let's do both.
Yeah.
Let's
I'm
start
not
off with
familiar
Dark
with
Knight.
Sin City. I think more people know.
But first I want to
Dark
see,
Knight.
I want to knock the lights off, let them look at the black on the
Right.
panel real quick.
Right, and then we're going to, as Bill suggests, we're going to look at content as well from some major Blu-ray discs.
Okay, can we drop the lights? Everybody have their paperwork or no?
These are all in calibrated mode now, right?
They're all in calibrated mode, absolutely.
Okay, because online someone once
Well, they
wanted
want
to be tasked. Can people tell the difference visually between uncalibrated and calibrated mode once you throw the lights in?
I don't know that they've had an opportunity to view enough to make that decision,
Right, no,
but that's a good
once we
question.
start watching,
Sure.
and we'll see what the audience has to say.
But Kevin, you want us to judge on mixed content, both the absolute black and...
Yeah, I just want you to look at black on them right now. It'll take two minutes or less, and then we're going to switch over to a couple of dark scenes in two different movies, so you can get a look at black level performance in a movie. So go for it, Dwayne. And you know what, Ed?
Yes, sir.
Let's go up to 1%, like we did yesterday. And I believe
Plus
you'll
one.
see. What's that?
You got +1 now.
You got +1. The Samsung LED is still not coming on at 1% above black. The Sony, you'll see, just kicked in. It's going to reproduce 1%, which is good. I want it to reproduce everything, right? Go to 2, please.
2.
Now the Sammy lights up at 2, so it's clipping a little bit. You're missing just a tiny bit of your 1% is not there. Not a huge issue, but certainly one that I'd love to see corrected in the E series next year, if there's going to be an E series. All right, let's look at some video content. Did everybody have a handle on this? Pretty. Okay.
Well, I have a question. Another scene.
The very next chapter is perfect. It's a night scene of Chicago. It just shoots right into it with some buildings with very low lighting in it. Extremely low APL. There you go. Well, not extremely. Oh.
I was going to pause it.
Keep going with right there. Detail up in the building walls and stuff like that. Into the car behind the guys in the driver's seat. That kind of thing. Look at the black bars. Also. Or in some cases, the not so black bars.
Right.
This is fantastic content to evaluate what we're doing now.
Look the way, notice the way it's going back between 16:9
Yeah.
and 2:35.
One of the few movies that changes aspect ratios during the movie, from 2:35 to
Very bizarre.
HD. Throughout part of this, you really should walk around the room and center yourself in front of each panel.
Particularly the LEDs, of course, because if we're off axis on them, the black is going to be washed out significantly.
Right. In contrast ratio, forgive me for speaking in calibrators shoes here. To me, the most important attribute, it's a measurement of brightness to deep black. To me, black is king. So there's two elements to contrast ratio or more, and I don't want to speak like you did, like you should do, but black is really the most important attribute.
Well, that's exactly what
You
I
agree?
said.
Yeah.
Well, particularly in this situation where we've limited the light output to a certain number on every
Right,
panel.
right. All
So
of these
now
are-
white is taken out of the equation because everything is equally bright.
Right. Everything is set to 35-foot lanterns, so they're on an equal playing field on their brightness. It's what the most they can produce in black that will make the difference here.
And the other thing that'll come into play will be gamma.
Absolutely. How
Yeah.
quick it comes out of black and white as well.
And speaking of black and everything, we haven't shown a black level test pattern. We need to do that before we move on so that you can see that they're all set correctly. Ed, can we go to the top 310 player with Spears and Munsell and bring up the dynamic range low test pattern, please?
Well, we're ready to just
Yeah,
since
sure.
everybody brought the churro, maybe Bill knows, or I should maybe join. That CES, that jaw-dropping CES demo of the first churro.
I heard about it. I didn't see it, but yeah, go ahead.
And they had an advanced production model of that same demo that was even blacker than the production model of the 101s when they first came out. Whatever happened to that technology? Did it come in, the technology that made that second churro, the demo,
It's
the
still
prototype.
owned by Pioneer.
Right, but
It never made it to market.
it never made it to market.
I know
but
it never made it to market, but I just wonder what happened. Does anybody plan to ever bring it to market? Because now we're over with LCDs.
I mean, I'm guessing it's still owned by Pioneer.
Well, that's a great
No,
question.
well, yeah, it's
No,
great
Panasonic.
Others know how to do it. Let's just leave it at that.
Why do we want to leave it at that?
Basically, there's
Well, we're all wondering when Panasonic. may
That's
be
what I'm
able to
saying.
do
That's
that.
what I was
Panasonic
asking
has a great deal of collaboration with the other side of Pioneer. Obviously, there was an LCD side and there's a plasma side. And guess what? Apparently, Sharp scooped up the, in collaboration with their Sharp engineers, the LCD side. My understanding is some of my good friends at Pioneer that were doing plasma ended up over with Panasonic, okay, as well did royalties and licenses. The reasons why some of these technologies don't get released immediately is because of the factories and the equipment, okay? What a Pioneer low-volume factory was capable of doing with their equipment and materials is different than a high-volume, million per month kind of factory, okay? Now, that doesn't mean that those things haven't rolled in and that some of the improvements aren't already evident, but
Well,
you
your
don't
black
change
levels-
factories overnight.
Your black level is clearly getting better every year.
Yeah, absolutely.
No doubt about that.
So, and I'm not saying it's only because of Pioneer collaboration with Panasonic. They were already doing that, and the fact that they've got a more advanced team altogether now just is great.
But the thing about that demo show that was memorable was that it was a plasma that was as black as the
Yes,
The
I
plasma was
didn't
just
see
shocking.
it, but I heard about
I mean,
it.
it came out of, it was
You
a
didn't-
logo that came out of darkness, they turned the lights off.
That was a great demo.
The logo came out of
2008.
nothing.
2008 that was. at
Since
CES,
someone,
yeah.
since someone at Panasonic did post this online a while ago, they do have a prototype. They can do the same thing that was designed by Panasonic. So that's all I was saying. It is capable. It's just getting it to market. That's the problem.
Yeah. I promised we weren't going to say that, but I'm glad you did actually.
Well,
But I couldn't say it.
yeah.
That's great.
I'm only saying it because it was already released by a spokesman. Well, I wouldn't say a spokesman, but someone from Panasonic.
Right.
It was already released online.
The
a while
cat's
ago.
out of the bag, so there's
yeah.
no reason why you
Yeah,
can't
it's
say
it's
it.
a prototype. They do have it. I mean, they can do it.
Now we
just
can
like
just
anyone else can.
hope that it'll come to market sooner than later.
Yes.
All right.
Dynamic range low?
Yes, please. And let's knock the light down and just take a look at black level. What we should be seeing is the 17 mark. The 16 mark should be invisible. Notice how this is reacting to this particular test pattern. You'll see it come back on a little bit. That's a little bit of an issue.
And Sony's clipping right there.
Yep, it's right on the money. Just so that you can see the black level is set correctly on all these things. Black on the Sony is actually really pretty.
Yeah.
It's clipping really good.
Yeah. Doesn't have enough
CRT
signal.
from 1970.
It just doesn't fully turn on. It doesn't wake up all the way. It's like me in the morning, having sleep.
The local dimming zones are set to turn off when there's no signal. And you're always going to get that one.
Which talking about the Samsung.
Yeah, what about it? The one that's not
Samsung's
reproducing
not
this?
on at all.
It's the software. It's their local dimming software, basically. Well, the edge-lit software is called to do that.
And there we go, bing, comes back up.
It needs a certain amount of light to be presented in the signal for it.
Yeah.
The micro dimming is turning it on.
Yeah.
I wonder what it does
Wow.
with a really low APL content like that in a movie. I mean, that would be
It'll do exactly that.
really.
You can turn micro dimming on.
Yeah, but who would want to do that? When your black level is shoot out. All right, I think we've covered contrast ratio pretty thoroughly. Time to move on to color saturation.